Trish, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. Hi, everyone. This is our first coffee break series, so it's pretty exciting. I think we have some exciting topics for the entire year. So we thought we'd start out with funding because that's pretty important these days. And we have Amy Cartwright and Amy Stedman, and they come from two different kind of sides of the culinary industry, or food or beverage industry, really, and getting funding. But there's, some bleed over on both sides. And so Amy comes from the consumer product goods side of things, and the other Amy Cartwright comes from beverage in a physical location. And so we'll just start. Why don't you guys Amy Stedman, why don't you start, introduce yourself and just maybe tell us a little bit about your path, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I am a new Dom as well, so I'm very excited to be at the meetings. So I'm Amy Stedman. I started the company Beatbox Beverages with my friends when we were doing our MBA at UT Austin. And so we started the company bootstrapped with our own savings. It was myself and 4 partners, and about $55,000 between us. And so with that, we got the company up and running. We had our first customers, our first production run that we made ourselves. We were, we had no employees or anything. It was just the 4 of us working for free for the first 2 or 3 years. So we just did that and, got some more traction going. We got some sales in stores. My dad went to church with the guy that owns Twin Liquors. And so we got into one of those, and so gave us a shot. And I was in that store, 6 to 9 hours a weekend doing hand selling and trying to sell tastings so that we could sell them out and get to the next store, right? So very humble beginnings. We recognized pretty quickly that in order for us to do what we wanted to do with the brand, which is for it to be a global brand, that we had to really hone in on what we did best, which was the sales and marketing aspect of the business. And so we wanted to outsource manufacturing, and we also needed to get a lot of investment in to build a brand. It's super expensive to build a brand. And so we started interviewing potential angel investors around 2013, early 2014. And then actually during that time at South by Southwest that year, they had a casting call for Shark Tank that was part of the Texas Exes program. And so we signed up, we waited in line, we pitched the producers for Shark Tank. And then we got in the first cut. And so we met with them every week after that, and then eventually flew to LA and filmed in the June of 2014. And luckily got one of the biggest deals ever on the show. We got $1 million from Mark Cuban for 1/3 of our business, which is an insane valuation. We had only done about $250,000 in sales at that point. We had just gotten into HEB. And so at that point, I got to quit my day job. So working 2 jobs this whole time, and got to quit my day job. And so we went full time, paid ourselves like 30 grand the first year, and put everything into growing the brand, trying it out. The alcohol beverage industry is very difficult. And so we had to learn a lot of things the hard way in terms of distribution and managing our retailers and our, chances that we got with chains and things like that. And so that was a really tough time to fundraise, honestly, because we had gotten this money from Mark, it was already gone, and the growth wasn't there for, normal investors to be really interested in us. So we hustled so hard and, talked to hundreds and hundreds of rich people about Beatbox, and got together a big party round for our Series A. We actually did get in some more celebrities with Rob Dyrdek from MTV's Ridiculousness and some other people that were just through networking, literally just a lot of networking. And then since then, we've done additional rounds. We actually just did a WeFunder campaign that opened it up to all of our fans to become investors in the company. So through crowdfunding now, anybody with $100 that's a fan of your brand can, put that money to buy equity in your business through these options. And so we have just passed the $1.1 million mark on that campaign as well. So in total for the business, we're just now this year reaching profitability in terms of getting to scale and having our margins where they need to be. And we have raised, I think, more than $13 million at this point from angels, no venture capitalists really, other than family offices, or like Springdale Ventures is pretty much the biggest VC or whatever that you would say. So a lot of networking, and that's why I love to do these talks, so that I can help anybody, because it's been a really tough road. It's been 10 years, so that's a long time of just fundraising that way. So
wow, Amy, that is so amazing. So a couple of key things that I think might be helpful. So can you explain to everybody what the difference is between an angel investor and a venture capital investor?
Yeah, so angel investors are high net worth individuals that like to invest in early stage startup companies because, for whatever reason, they really like it. They like the category. They themselves are entrepreneurs and want to give back. And so that's where most of our investors have come from. They're actually entrepreneurs themselves that really like me and my co-founders and our big vision. And so, that's where you see those pitch decks come out, and you've got to kind of sell them that this company is going to be, 100x what it is today one day, and that you're the team that's going to get them there to do it. And so that's what you really focus on when you're pitching those folks. Venture capitalists are people that are managing other people's money. So they've got, a big fund or something like that they're representing. And so they're more in the business of investing. And so usually they'll have a thesis for their company where they're saying, okay, we invest in healthcare, female founders, something like that. And then they try and find companies that align with that they think are really, valuable in the same way. And then they invest through that way. So typically angel investors will invest in earlier stage companies or companies that are not profitable or riskier type companies. VCs do that sometimes, but more often they're looking for companies that are like 10 millions in sales that they want to grow to, 100 million or 300 million in sales or something like that. So it's kind of like this whole early stage sometimes really gets missed by those VCs.
Nice. Okay. And so, let's say an angel investor wants to invest in your restaurant or business. Can you kind of walk us through what that usually looks like, and really specifically, maybe what sort of business formation does your company need to be first? And then secondly, what is that process like? What is an angel investor going to give you money for in exchange for what exactly?
Right. Great question. So early stage, there's a lot of different ways you can do it, right? You can just get a loan from somebody completely like debt, like you agree to an interest price, you agree to a date that you pay them back. But usually people will do something early on called a convertible note, which is something like that with debt, or there's some benefit to it where they're getting a deal ahead of future investors. So you say, hey, I want to raise $100,000 in convertible debt upon and it's going to convert to a valuation. So you have to set like a value for your company. Sorry if I'm going too fast. I'm like, there's a lot of information, but basically you're selling part of your company for a certain amount of money, or you're giving them a basically interest and future money for money now. And so, or some combination of those two. And so you can be any business type to do that. I'm an LLC at Beatbox. I know a lot of companies that are on Shark Tank and stuff like that are like C Corps or S Corps. You can get investors no matter what. You just have to work with your lawyer to write the right documents for either of those. And so, for example, when we first raised money with Mark Cuban, he did $1 million, but he didn't do it all at once. We did $250,000 tranches over 1 year. And it was actually structured as debt at first because in my industry, there's so many things with ownership and compliance and alcohol. And so we actually needed a lot of time to sort out some of his investments, some of our permits, so that everything would be compliant once he was an equity owner. And so we structured it as convertible debt. And so I don't believe he got an interest rate on it. I think it was just no interest rate. But, over that period of time, it was just structured as debt on the company books. And then at one point it converted to his ownership. And so that's when he got a third of the business. And it just looked like on our books, this is a third of the business. It's not money that we owe anybody. It's just charted in the accounting as equity. So that's what convertible debt is. You can also just sell somebody part of your company straight up. You don't have to do the interest thing. It's just the difficult part about that is you have to set a valuation, and sometimes it's difficult to agree on what that valuation is when you first start because you don't have any revenue yet. And a lot of times valuation is based on your revenue. And so you don't want to sell yourself too short by setting a very low valuation for your company when it could be something very valuable. So that's why a lot of people choose to do the debt option to start with until you get some revenue and you can kind of agree on a valuation from there.
Okay.
We did something similar. I don't know, since the question's just open, might as well just jump in, maybe go back and forth. So when we were first looking to start our business, we didn't have, we were originally trying to go down the traditional bank lending route, and it was quickly obvious that that was not the right path. And we did meet an initial some angel investors early on. And so part of having people approach us with the idea of even investing, the way we went about it is we did form a corporation and then spent the money we had saved on creating all the legal structure for the business. So we did a private placement memorandum, and that basically was the structure that we used to sell private stock. So there are limitations to it in terms of, especially back then you couldn't advertise it. So there's a lot of networking, similar to what Amy was talking about. But what I found helpful about it is just putting the work in up front. We had very clear guidelines for our shareholders and what, how they would earn money over time. So, the very first investors we ever had, we created a Series A stock. So they got a little bit more of a benefit. And then we had a Series B. And so eventually we went through a process of converting everybody to common stock, after we had kind of fulfilled our obligations to those original shareholders. And just, we found that having, something, I don't know, I think angel investors like to think they're getting something special out of the business by taking the risk, because it's, we didn't have anything up and running yet. We just had our experience of working as brewers in the past. So, you're just presenting your idea, you're saying this is what it's going to grow to, but take a chance. And at the time that we were starting or trying to start back in 2003, 2002, 2003, most of the brew pubs in Austin had closed. So you're trying to present an idea and you're like, no, but we're not going to be a restaurant, bar, brewery. We're making something out there. So, but I remember spending quite a bit of money on this, all of the legal, structure of the business, and it was sort of depressing at first. But I can tell you, over the years, having just really well outlined scenarios for our shareholders has come in handy so many times, because there's all sorts of things like what happens if someone gets divorced, what happens to those shares, or what happens if somebody passes away. You want to think about, sometimes you don't take the time to think about those things, but working with a good attorney just to say, it protects your interests as well, because there's a lot of disclosure of that this is a risky business. This isn't, you're laying out there that there is risk to investing in a business. You get the investor to really acknowledge that, so people don't come out, can't try to say later that, hey, you guys aren't doing what you said you were going to do. So yeah, anyways, the private placement memorandum was quite of a process early on to go through legally, but it basically has served us the last 17 years. And it was kind of gave us that flexibility to, 10 years in, 12 years in, go through another round. So
Wow, thank you. That's so helpful. I've never heard of a private placement memorandum before, so.
yeah, it basically is privately held equity stock, but it's a private offering. That's another way how people refer to it.
Okay, so Amy Cartwright, then why don't you tell us maybe if you not everybody understands what an accredited investor is, and
Right.
how you vet that, or if it's important, why it's important.
Right. So actually, some of the additional, besides the shareholder agreement, when we were creating the legal documentation for the business, we did outline what an accredited investor would be. So I'm trying to remember all of them. There was like definitely about 12 different bullet points. One has to do with just, if you're just an individual, usually you need to really demonstrate your net worth. It needs to be somebody that, is not going to go bankrupt by investing in your company, just in layman's terms. But, you have other, there's different definitions of like a savvy investor, like maybe you've invested in a company before, or you might be part of a family group, or you have someone who manages your finances. So there's a variety of ways you can document that you're an accredited investor. So typically we, on the paperwork that we had people complete, it typically had an NDA attached, and then we had them fill out some basic information to, attest to that they were an accredited investor. And, the whole idea behind it is just that that people understand what they're getting into and that they're financially capable of supporting that investment.
Very nice. Okay, well, do you want to give us more of your background and path to opening, like Amy did, maybe in your original path for investors? I mean, you kind of did that a little bit already, and then maybe we'll just open it up to questions from everybody.
Yes. So, well, my husband and I both had worked at brew pubs in college. So I didn't necessarily think I was going to go down this path originally, but just got very involved in I was originally doing tech work. And when you help some of those businesses start up, you kind of get the bug. And but I wanted something more tangible, and I really always loved beer. So sort of a natural fit. My first job when I moved to Austin to go to UT was at a brew pub called the Bitter End. So I just blame them. But around, the early 2000s, we did a lot of research on just starting a brewery, and Austin just seemed like a really great place. There was a lot of opportunity. There really wasn't that many breweries in the state. The laws back then were very, very restrictive. As Amy Stedman mentioned, there's so much regulation around alcohol production and retail. So there's a lot to learn in that industry. But the funny part is we had been struggling, talking to banks quite a bit. I thought we could get an SBA loan. So really thinking very traditionally about how to borrow money. And ironically, one of the women I worked with, she knew someone who in our company that was married to a man that was wanting to start a brewery. So she asked me if we would meet with them. So I remember going to the back of the Ginger Man. We met with these two guys, and I felt like I was on Shark Tank. They like pummeled us with questions for like an hour. And finally I was like, I need to use the restroom. And I was like, to my husband, I'm like, let's get the hell out of here. What are we even here for, at first? And so get back to the table. And I was just trying to get out of the situation. And both of these guys turn to us and say, we want to be involved in your company. And at that point I was like, what do you mean? They're like, well, you obviously know what you're doing. We want to get involved with what you're doing. So it was sort of a shock. And then it was like, I remember going home that night saying, how the hell did we not think about this other path? So Fortunately, we had a good attorney that had helped us with just forming the business entity originally. And so we went back to him and basically, the money I'd saved up, worked over the next month or so, really crafting, the documentation and understanding more about the process that we were about to get involved in. So it was funny because those two guys actually were brought in like several of their fraternity brothers. And so those were like our very first shareholders. So we were talking to people before we had everything ready to go. And so, we had about 15 original Series A shareholders. And I remember, one of the things that's very difficult when you're in that time period, as Amy was mentioning, is figuring out, our valuation is based on future, potential future sales, because that's all you have. But one of the things that was beneficial to us in starting like a physical operation was there had been quite a few brewery closures in the late 90s. So a lot of our equipment and things that we were after was actually highly discounted. So, the whole like starting up the operation, we had the background knowledge of how to do all this stuff ourselves versus a lot of people that try and get involved in this type of manufacturing operation, need consultants and expensive people to come in and do the work. So, that was our pitch to our original shareholders, is that we had brewed beer for a long time and knew how to build all this stuff out, and there was equipment used. So, looking back though, some of the lessons I think that are difficult to foresee is just that you always seem to need more money than you think you'll need. And just getting up and running isn't quite enough, so, or there's just cost overruns, City of Austin permits taking forever, all those lessons. So having a mechanism to be able to go back and raise additional funds, that I think overall was the benefit of the way we built it. Granted, you're not going to be able to do that forever. People, want a return on their investment. So, yeah. And then the funny part is we built this whole mechanism. We thought we had it all figured out and we're really smart. And our largest original shareholder was like, he was what I consider a true, wealthy angel investor. That's good. That's good for everyone else. But I'm going to negotiate my own deal. And so, being prepared to have, a structure to do that with. So he's been our partner ever since. But the funny part is just, I think looking back, there's two really good pieces of advice. I remember getting a little like, annoyed. I was doing that. I don't know if any of you have ever done the retired entrepreneurs club. I forget what they're called, but and I was all excited. I was meeting with our advisor and he's going to give us all this great advice. And he was like, just don't give it all away. I'm like, all right. Yeah. And you're just trying to raise money at that point, but he was right. He's like, you're the one going to be working, and doing all the work. So you don't want to undervalue what you have. And, I just think, secondly, yeah, so first you're going to need more money probably. Secondly, just having a mechanism to do that. And then, but also don't give it all away.
All right, well, let's just open it up. And does anyone have any questions for Amy or Amy?
I do. I was wondering, could either of you speak to your experience, I guess, negotiating or even articulating with a potential investor about what their role in like day-to-day operations would be? So like, for example, Amy Stedman, I would imagine like Mark Cuban isn't giving you advice on like the color of the packaging, but like in the restaurant world, you hear all the time about all of a sudden an investor comes in and like, they have an idea for a dish on the menu or something. And it's like, yeah, that's not what I need you here for, right? So could either of you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, we definitely get all kinds of ideas from our investors and things like that. And I mean, I think that's why as the owner, like you should definitely understand that if you're taking on investors, that's part of your job description moving forward is like managing their incoming emails and good communication there, right? So just know that that's like, it does take time to do that stuff. But yeah, we actually have like a formal board set up. So Mark Cuban's brother is on my board. And so we have quarterly board meetings, and it's kind of like you present a way that they can provide feedback. So it's structured for you. And, there's some things that are defined as voting, like who gets to vote on things, like that'll be defined in your articles of organization. Another great reason, to echo Amy Cartwright's point of working with a great attorney so that you know how it's all going to be set up and structured. And then beyond that, like you don't have to really talk to people. Like there were people that came in early on that really felt like we should be definitely taking their advice all the time and like telling them what we were doing all the time and stuff. And we actually did have to set a boundary there, because it was just like, you don't have all the information that we have running the business. So it doesn't make sense for me to sit there and tell you everything I know and then listen to you, what you think about it, with you not even being like an alcohol industry person or anything. Like, so we set a barrier with that, and it was an uncomfortable conversation, but a necessary one. And at the end of the day, the legal document protects you in terms of what information rights they have and what you have to do with that information. And if there are disagreements, if they're settled by voting or how they're settled. So thankfully on the board, we've never had, we have a very entrepreneur friendly board, and we've never had anything that we've definitely like pushed hard to recommend that they've like been like, hell no, or anything. Like usually they do listen to us. That's the reason they invested in us, is because they believe in us. So we haven't had like too much drama, but yes, sometimes. And Amy, I don't know if you want to add on to that as well.
I think one thing that was included in some of our language was we just really made sure it says something like investing does not like it's something along the lines of like, this doesn't mean that you work for the company, doesn't guarantee employment. And so it's sort of, it's very clear, like you don't work for the company, like here's the people who are working and making the decisions. So even though it seemed like you wouldn't have to state that, it was good. I think that was just one other little bit to put in there. It's like, I think early on when we had, kind of our Series B, I would call it, investors, was definitely had a few people that tried to get us to start an advisory board, which we already had our board of directors. So I felt like, at that time, it was like year 3, 4 of the business. And I truly didn't have time to also have an advisory board. So, artfully and gently pushing back on that, I said, you can always send me what you want to say. Like, I'm not going to create a whole nother structure for shareholders to provide, more direction. So kind of had to say no.
I have a question. Do you all have lawyers that you'd recommend working with?
We use Kastner Gravel in Austin. I'll put their link in the chat for you guys, and they've been really helpful. We were with somebody previously, and they were really, really expensive for us, and so I found that they've been, very valuable for the price, as well as just great by themselves. So
I've been lucky that I followed our attorney to he was very young when he started with us, and I call it like it was more of an expensive kind of high pressure, probably law setting. And so as he, had children and wanted to have more of a life, he moved to a different group. And so, yeah, it's, but I can put his into. So I felt one of the really good things is just having someone who's been with us since the very beginning has been helpful, because he understands, the history of the company. And and he's just a nice guy. So I found, in addition to our, so we have 2 attorneys. The second attorney group we work with is for alcohol law compliance, and that's just specialty. There's things that as legislation changes, and I mean, the laws in Texas have changed radically in the last 17 years. So, it's hard. It's actually hard to keep up with that stuff and to understand the language of alcohol laws. Not always very straightforward. So, yeah, I'll do the same. I'll try and put the links in there.
Yes, I have many alcohol law firms that I will link for you. Texas, Kimberly Frost is the one that I use. She's Frost Martin Hill is the firm.
Yeah, we work with Frost too.
The best.
Anyone else have some questions?
I'd also love to hear you all talk about kind of preparing, especially for Shark Tank, and, preparing some of these documents for these investors. What did you feel like you needed to share, both about your brand and vision, and then about hard numbers and how you got there?
Yeah, so we were in MBA school, and so we were doing business plan competitions like as part of school a lot. So we had that kind of preparation through going to MBA, but there are so many cool resources for that these days. Everything from what we're doing here to there's female entrepreneur groups, there's Naturally Austin, there's Capital Factory. There's a lot of ways to get folks to really help with your pitch and telling your story and making sure you're ready to go. On the financial side, if it's very early stage, they should understand it's an educated guess, if anything, right? So you're just trying to sell your vision for the company. Like for us, we said, we don't want to be like a local brand. We want to be an international global brand. And so that is the vision. Here's the kind of revenue that tells that story. And we're going to get there. And then there's the bottoms up approach of now when we do forecasts, it's very structured on, okay, I know exactly how many units per store on average I sell, all by these different store types. I know exactly how many territories I'm opening up, how many chains we're going to be in this spring, like all that kind of stuff. So it's much more, structured and based on that data. So I would just say, depending on where you're at with your business, it's one of those things that you could get a community mentor or, an accountant to help you build. And I've gotten quotes from folks to build like a startup pro forma, I'd say probably around $4,000 is, I don't know if that's a lot of money or not a lot of money, but that's the quote I got recently. So I just wanted to share that.
I think one thing that's, really important, just to echo, is just really showing that you have the talent to execute. If it's never been done or you're really and truly startup mode, just why you, so much of like our early pitches were really just people believing that we could do it, and so I felt like I was very introverted when we first started the process. And after 2 years of raising money, when we were finally like brewing beer, I was like, went and did all of our initial sales because like, well, when you ask people for money for 2 years, you get really good at talking to people. So definitely was not originally like this at all.
Yeah,
in my early career.
I was a computer programmer before, so yeah. Definitely. I call it my sell shell. It's like the fake it till you make it, like sales persona that you put on, and then one day you can just do it and it's fine. So yeah.
The other thing is too, we had 1 or 2 initial, angel investors, being able to tap into them just for advice and resources. They helped build our deck over time as well. So, one of the 2 guys I was mentioning, one of the guys worked for Dell in finance. And so he was able to look at, like, we hadn't even crafted a deck, he's the one who approached us about wanting to invest. So, I think the people that are, if you have initial partners, just really making sure you have the right grouping of people, or, and if you don't have that talent, knowing a resource to go get, some guidance on that. I would be curious in this group, like how many people, I know everybody's got their cameras off now, but maybe it's like use the raise a hand thing. Like how many people have had gone through or thought about trying to do investment raising? I'm just curious, like what other mechanisms people may have had, just because, we went down one path, but I'm sure there's many.
And I would say too that I will drop my email in the chat. I very regularly do feedback on people's pitch decks and talk to people about fundraising all the time. So very happy to do it for any of you as well, if there's more conversations you want to have about it. I do unfortunately need to go on my phone because I need to start driving somewhere, but I will stay and listen in on my phone, but I'm going to cut the video off.
Mandy or Brenda, can you share what you all have done?
Sorry, yeah. We've been in business as long as Amy has. We started in 2003, but we funded it ourselves and we've funded it the whole time, but we have considered all these different alternatives, but never have really done anything to pursue it.
One thing that I thought was interesting years ago when we were trying to get ready to do an expansion, just physical equipment and breweries are really expensive. That's basically the reason why we went straight to that from the very get-go. It's just that, it's a lot of stainless steel and that the equipment isn't very, as expensive. But I remember there definitely were some other scenarios, but I had reached out to the SBA because we had been in business at this point of, about 7-8 years when we wanted to start looking to the future to expand. And I thought it was funny just because it was so different from what I was expecting. So I had gotten guidance from that group, and I know several of the breweries in town have done this. So they took out an SBA loan to buy the property that they intended to build on in the future. And then the SBA loan for their operational build out, they could use the land that they had purchased through SBA to actually qualify them for the other SBA loan. And I was like, at first I was like, that makes no sense. That's like double dipping, isn't it? And the SBA, the banker that we were talking to at the time explained, well, no, because the land is, just really is such an asset. So that was an eye opener to me. I was like, well, wait a minute. So I get a loan, buy property, be paying down that loan, and then use that loan, that land that's already being borrowed for, to then take out another loan. But apparently that is one way. We didn't ever do that, but that was an eye opener to me.
Amy, that's my experience too. I own the building that Drinkwell is in for that reason, because I couldn't get a business loan, but I could get a real estate loan to purchase the building, and then the building became the collateral for the business. And from the bank's perspective, they're like, hey, if your business goes under, we have a building that we can take from you, right? But it is tricky because now you're in the real estate business, not necessarily just the bar or restaurant business, right? So you have this piece of property that you have to maintain, and you are the landlord, right? So if something breaks, you have to fix it, and there's pros and cons to it. But yeah, my business is structured very similarly because I couldn't get funding otherwise.
Yeah, the most frustrating things of trying to get traditional funding is, the amount you need to borrow, they pretty much want you to have that in the bank. So why would I be trying to borrow if I already had that funding? That definitely got told to us. The other thing that was interesting for us, I guess, was just being told repeatedly that, we weren't borrowing enough money. These big groups, especially in tech here in town, like, well, if you needed to borrow like $20 million or $30 million, we would be interested, but 5, no. So that was an interesting experience too, of just knowing the different groups to even approach with this type of thing. And since it was all privately done, it was really just based on your network. So just spent a lot of time going to different things and trying to meet people and learn more about different avenues available. And who knows, maybe if I years ago had met some more consumer packaged goods people, it would have gone a little faster. But that most of the people we were meeting were more in the kind of bar and restaurant scene, and kind of thinking of they were just into the idea because hey, it's beer, it's fun, we can get beer when we want to, maybe make a little bit of money. One of the things that we built into the Series A round that we did is we had a 5-year initial plan. So our original shareholders, we had built in an option for conversion. So at the end of 5 years, we had guaranteed, it's the equivalent of interest. We were going to pay out a one-time dividend, and then they would have the option to maintain their shares or just sell them. So there was a lot of working towards that point at the 5-year mark. So we had to save quite a bit of money just to, so that was actually really hard part of the business, because that's actually at a stage where we were trying to grow as well. So just fulfilling our obligations in that year 5 point to either pay out this dividend and convert. And most of our shareholders actually converted. So that was great. But, we were potentially in a situation where we'd have to buy back, the original folks' shares. So that was a fair amount of capital to have ready.
Yeah, we have not done anything like that yet. We may soon, but that's really interesting, Amy.
Yeah.
This is Amy Steadman on the phone.
It was sort of a blessing and a curse. It made us have to do it, but we at that time in the brewery's history, we really could have used that money for expanding. So I don't know that it was our smartest move, but it definitely attracted our original shareholders. And later on, years later, when we did need to go get additional funding, we had fulfilled our promises to everybody. So just making good on your word of what we said we were going to do went a long way, because all those people that were the original backers of us really had that testimonial. So just be careful what you promise.
Absolutely. I will say it's never as hard as it is in the beginning, because it's just like I think that there's this FOMO effect that happens and this network effect that happens once you get those first initial angels in to kind of bring in that credibility. So, I think it gets easier is the lesson.
Yeah.
And Amy Steadman, on crowdfunding, you said you guys are doing a crowdfunding now.
Yep.
What was the platform you mentioned? It was one I think I hadn't been familiar with.
Yeah, it's called WeFunder. If you want to check out our campaign, it's invest.futureprf.com to get a link to go there. But it's basically, there's several of them now. WeFunder, I found, was the lowest in terms of what they actually took from the percentage of the raise, for example. But there's several of them. There's like Seed Invest and, a few different ones out there. And so it's just the platform. You still have to, we still use Kastner Gravel to set up a fundraising round as normal, but you can do the docs in such a way that it's a crowdfunding. It's called a Form CF. And then you work with WeFunder and they file it for you and it's compliant. And the only person that's on your cap table, like all of those investors are represented by one investor. So that makes it really easy, a lot easier for me from an alcohol compliance perspective to only have to deal with one new owner instead of, we had over 1,000 investors come in through the platform. So just like the admin involved was like incredible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very helpful. Anybody else?
And I think it's great because you get brand ambassadors, like people that are invested in your company are out there promoting it, excited about it, gifting it to their friends. Like for us, it's a dream come true. I think it's something that any consumer brand or any community-based brand should definitely look at because it gets people excited.
Is it something that is possible, or would you even recommend for a startup?
Yeah, it's pretty much only startups.
Okay.
I know here.
Yeah, I mean the risks involved and things like that are communicated by the platform as well when they sign up to invest through the account. So, when you look at the accredited investor considerations that Amy was mentioning, with crowdfunding, it's slightly different because it's sort of like buying stocks or whatever. You're not buying like a whole share, you're just buying partial. So
I was just going to add, I remember the folks from Hops and Grain when they were trying to get ready to, build another tap room down in San Marcos, had a pretty successful raise through crowdfunding. I think they raised about $1 million. And so one of the things I remember seeing as they were going through the process was just, you have a physical location like that, they had little perks. So there was levels to it too of, what you got for it. So it wasn't, sometimes you can, make it attractive by even just having little, little aspects of it, So and basically for them, if you think about it, oh, you get a discount off. Well, now you have customers already coming in the door. So, I mean, I think you have to think about it from what you're trying to do. So if you are a bar, restaurant or something like that, maybe there's ways that you can utilize that platform to even get people in the door.
yeah, we didn't do any of those perks or anything, but that being said, we don't have a location, right? So it's like a benefit on both sides if you do.
Yeah.
And Amy Stedman, so now you have, you have different brands now, and are they all under the Future Proof? And
yeah, so the new brands that are on there are just pilot brands right now. They're just in like a handful of stores each. We were planning on launching them in 2020, but 2020 just being what it wasn't the year to do that. And so we're just kind of waiting for things to open back up again to start pushing on those brands. Beatbox is just on fire though. So like with a small team, we've really just been like 99.9%. We've been like growing like crazy. So
very nice. Well, you two are such an inspiration to all of us, and really appreciate all your knowledge, and thank you for doing this for us today, and thank you for making yourself available to the Doms going forward. That's really very generous, and I know will be a huge way to give back to this community. So I don't know, Allison, what do you think? You want to take it from here?
Yeah, thank you all so much. You're amazing. Just wanted
thank you.
About the next coffee series. February 16th is going to be Paulina Artieda with the New Philanthropist and talking about incorporating diversity within your leadership. And then on February 24th, we have Kim Hanks and Lisa Edwards talking about preparing for negotiations. Exciting. They're from kind of the supplier side. So, really kind of learning some of the tricks of trades of how do we work with suppliers. So we're excited about that. We have some other fun ones coming up in March and April. Everything will be either through the Facebook page or through newsletters. So just keep an eye out for those, and you'll see the Zoom links. And a big thank you for Trish for organizing this coffee series. It was great. Thank you, Trish.
You're welcome. Okay, everyone have a good weekend.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.